More on foldable phones and revolutionary products, an iPad going to the moon, and Apple ad revenue. This is MacVoices. Today's MacVoices is supported by MacVoices After Dark. Uncensored, off-topic, and always off the wall. MacVoices After Dark is available as a benefit to our Patreon subscribers. Sign up at patreon.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. This is part 2 in a 3-part MacVoices live conversation. The panel continues their discussion of revolutionary products and foldable phones, and we also touch on why an iPad is going to the moon for a surprising reason, and start to dip into comments about Apple's ad revenue. Let's go back and let the panel do the talking.
I'm going to disagree with you a little bit, Guy.
No!
Yeah. I mean, certainly what you're talking about accelerated things, but I think the original iPod, that was the transformation right there. And people were already buying Macs because they wanted iPod. And like you say, originally the iPod required a Mac. Now, certainly what you're talking about, that turbocharged everything to the next degree. But I think, the original iPod itself was so revolutionary that, and the original iPod, it pretty much had to be FireWire because the only USB available was so slow that it would have taken hours to fill the device. So actually the FireWire thing was part of the whole thing that made it revolutionary because, it had a 5 gig drive and it had a plug that could fill that 5 gig in a reasonable time. I think, if you look at the breakthroughs that Apple has done, they're all ones where basically a big investment was made ahead of time, and basically all except for maybe the watch and the AirPod, which were not as big of things as these other things we're talking about, all on Steve Jobs' hunch or intuition. Steve Jobs said, I think this can sell, and I'm going to put all the resources I have behind to make that happen. And I don't care what's been done before. I'm not incrementally building on what's been done before. And that's sort of been, the secret is that, all these other companies, they can't do that. They don't have any executive in charge that, can go out on a flyer like that and, bet the company on making a Macintosh or making an iPod or making an iPhone. Apple may not be able to do that anymore either. They don't have Steve Jobs anymore. On the other hand, they're not a little, garage company anymore. So they don't really have to do that, anymore. And they can build incrementally, and it's, occasionally come out with things like a watch and a AirPod and a car. Did they announce the car yet?
Yeah. Well, and thank you, Jim, because I want to pull us back to the present. I mean, we can argue the past and a million times. We sound like a bunch of old guys. So let's talk about the current.
What'd you say?
Sound like it?
Yeah. So let's talk about.
Apparently, Chuck's video feed is working correctly.
At which point, Jim's video started to stutter. Right there. That's perfect. Guy, you said one interesting thing there, though, that I think is a point that we need.
Only one.
Only one. Yeah, only one.
But I just took so damn long to get there.
I blacked out before you got there. So.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a widget or a box or any piece of hardware. It can be something that is a combination or something that eases the pain. And I know Jim was laughing, but so where could Apple go where there's pain that it might be able to ease? Could it be into the car? Or
I wasn't laughing. I want an Apple car.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I mean, listen, hey, who wouldn't? I'd like an Apple airline right now, the way the airlines are going, but that's a whole other discussion.
No windows.
But, how about how about, is it possible that we already have two components of the next big thing? That we have a watch on our wrist that can give us some kind of feedback, and we have AirPods in our ears with spatial audio, and we're just waiting for the visual part of that.
Right.
And that all turns into sort of a combination mega revolutionary product.
As for the human body, how many places can you visualize getting information into your body?
Yeah. Let me draw you a picture.
But
I was just going to say.
But that's the question.
Jeff.
Like, again, in the 50s,
In
people
3, 2, 1.
Okay.
Underwear.
Again, in the 50s, people could say, wow, how cool would it be to have a little thing in front of my face I could look at and read and it changes. What can we, what don't we have now that we could do that with? Like, VR, things like
But
that.
the interesting thing about that, Warren, is in the 50s, nobody was saying, almost nobody was talking about small devices like that. Like if you look at science fiction from the 50s and 60s, computers were like going to grow until they took over a planet.
Dave posted,
The M5 will survive.
Yeah, Dave posted something on Facebook not too long ago that said, right, with the woman who had an article and said, in the future you could carry something. It said in the future you could carry this. And what was that, from the 60s, 70s?
1963.
63. Yeah.
So it's exactly what it was. Basically, she's visualizing what you could get in 50 years, right? So what are we visualizing in 50 years,
but
how life is going to be? For me, anybody see the movie Her?
Heart?
Her.
Oh, no, I didn't see it.
With Siri, was the Scarlet. So
right.
With
falls in love with his voice assistant,
Joaquin Phoenix, right? So that's who it was. But the future is exactly that. It was like a small, tiny thing in your ear, and that is basically a virtual assistant that works. And there's monitors throughout the world where you could get information standing next to it, and it just beams it to it. And that's the least intrusive way to get information into yourself. And I think that's where they want to go. And that's why virtual assistants are trying. But, again, the goal is, what are we missing? What can, other than, brain control and whatever.
I also think if you look at Apple breakthroughs, that they've taken some technology that exists, but nobody really saw, that other people didn't really see. Like the iPod was like somebody went to Japan and said, hey, Toshiba has this little tiny hard drive and they don't know what to do with it. And somebody at Apple said, I know what to do with it. We're going to make a music player out of it. And, nobody else had seen that. The iPhone, somebody, like people in Japan were developing these multi-touch, displays that, and the people at, somebody at Apple was like, I know what to do with that. Even the Macintosh, they went and saw what Xerox had done with the Star, that Xerox wasn't really bringing to market. And that was the inspiration for the Macintosh. So, it's kind of like inherent that we won't know about those things ahead of time, because that's the whole point of Apple's success, is somebody sees something that nobody else is noticing and turns it into the next big thing. So if that's happening now, by definition, we don't know about it, or everybody'd be doing it.
There you go.
Yeah. Let's move it on, but I want to give Brian the last word here. Let me find his comments. Brian says, my wife picked up a foldable Samsung and promptly returned it one day later back to her Pixel. She forgot about all the bloatware that is on Samsung devices.
There you go.
And when I asked him about the bloatware, that was the reason. It wasn't the form factor, it was the bloatware that she returned it to. She got used to the minimalist vanilla Android she got from Pixel and couldn't go back. She was a fan of the flip fold phone, but the bloatware was just too much. And she mentions the experience from being pushed to use the Samsung brand of apps and constant updates.
I would have rooted it before I did that, but
That's you.
That's me.
You. That's us.
But returning a $2,000 phone to get an $800 phone because you don't like the bloatware, it might be worth it.
I would totally do that. Screw those guys loading up my phone with a bunch of garbage.
Yeah.
Screw them.
Well,
I would return it so fast.
I assume you're not being flipped.
No, I'm serious. Like if I spend that kind of money on a product and it's loaded up with garbage right out of the package, screw that. I don't need that. I paid too much money to be fed all this garbage. It's going back.
That should lead us to our next story with the advertising that for Apple.
Well, actually, I'm going to slip one in first. I'm throwing it in the chat room now, assuming I copied the link right. Yes. So there's this. This happened. This just came out right after our last show. But NASA is going to send an iPad to the moon. But what threw me is they're going to send an iPad to the moon to test Alexa.
Oh, the irony is so delicious.
So
it's been mentioned before that NASA has lost its way, and that's why Bezos and Musk and their private space companies are leaving them behind.
They would send up a fire tablet, but it would disintegrate and break before it got to the moon. So Warren, get something that's a little bit stronger.
Warren, you read my mind, because this seemed to be an indictment of Amazon's tablets, but also an indictment of Siri.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like this was a double shot at in one story. I mean,
we need a device that's not going to fall apart and a virtual assistant that doesn't suck. So we'll put the Amazon app on an iPad.
Well, no, Chuck, I disagree, because Alexa is very open for adding new skills. Siri is not. So I think that's
true.
They wanted voice interface, they had no other choice.
Okay, all right, that's an interesting point, Mark.
They have a Darth Vader death mode skill too.
You can't win, Siri. I have the high ground.
It's going to blow. Well, hey Alexa, blow up Aldrin.
Yeah, and it did say that there's, obviously it's not going to be connected to the internet. That there's going to be an onboard version of Alexa that will be addressing those requests.
Stop saying Alexa.
So
put it in that.
That's interesting.
Shot up into space.
Oh, one at a time, guys. Guy, what'd you say?
Said put it in that Saturn Sky or whatever that convertible was that they shot up into space with the fake astronaut.
Tesla.
I heard three of you at once there. Jim, what'd you say on top of?
Well, I missed that detail, and I find it fascinating that apparently there's a version of the A Lady that can run on an iPad without a connection to the internet.
It's actually not running on an iPad.
Yeah,
the iPad's job is to be the go-between. So they have a self-contained A Lady computer.
I see.
In the spacecraft, but they don't have anyone there that can issue it commands. So they're using the iPad as the relay tool so they can talk to the A Lady device.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you're not even using the A Lady on the iPad? It's talking to it. It's
worst honeymoon ever.
It's like a video camera. It's basically a glorified video camera.
It's basically like one of those things with the iPad that wanders around on a robot. And
they're basically FaceTiming an Echo in orbit.
So then is this iPad connected to the internet then?
No, it's connected to their communications system.
Correct.
Right. And whoever brought up the skills part, I mean, that is something I hadn't clicked, but they were talking about how they would be using voice commands to ask for certain information to be spoken or maybe even displayed.
Well, also the fact that apparently they're putting up a computer that runs A Lady, and Apple will not give you a computer that runs S Lady without a connection to the internet.
Well, that's true too. So, I mean, as always, we have this group would come up with more questions than answers, but I thought I could not let that one go, because okay, who's it taking a shot at? Taking a shot at everybody.
No.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, who's on the moon that needs to give commands to a smart assistant?
Well, they're going to send astronauts next.
Yeah. So.
I'm here. I'm still here, but my watch wants me to stand. You don't want to see my.
Well, you can.
And since Mark's not wearing pants, he decided to turn his camera off.
Adjust your camera.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mark, please don't adjust your camera until you've sat back down.
Okay.
Claire in the chat room says iPads are becoming an aviation standard. My brother is a 737 captain, and his whole fleet is issued iPads for maps and calculations. Seems to be trusted for safety. Yeah, that's not the first time we've heard that.
I think that's been the case for several years.
Yeah, the amount of weight that it saves, and of course, every ounce is precious.
Also, you can keep everything up to date automatically.
Yeah.
They used to have to get new charts quarterly and interleave them manually into their notebooks.
Don't even have to plug it in.
Yeah. All the old, was it Jefferson charts?
Yeah.
Jeppesen.
Okay.
The reason I can rattle that off with a sense of authority is because DIA, the airport in Denver, the main terminal is named after him.
Okay.
Even have a statue of him holding a propeller or leaning up against.
Careful how you say DIA in the DC area.
Right.
Yes.
That means a whole different thing.
That's right. It's an ETF monitoring the Dow Jones index.
This edition of Mac Voices is supported by our Patreon subscribers and Mac Voices After Dark. Ever wonder what happens before the Mac Voices live shows? Or what happens when the show ends or after the live feed closes? That's where Mac Voices After Dark comes in. If you are a Patreon supporter at any level, you get access to the video of our off-camera conversations. Uncensored, unedited, and always off the wall. It's a small thank you to our Patreon supporters who want to peek behind the curtain. Become a Patreon subscriber at patreon.com/MacVoices. And thanks to everyone who supports the show. I threw into the chat rooms the next article, which is the one from The Verge about Apple wanting more advertising revenue.
Can I start with that?
I was waiting, Mark. I knew you would want to. Go for it.
Okay, yeah. So 2 points about this. The first is this is all clickbait. This is absolutely all clickbait to get people to read in, because once you read into the substance of the article, what you find is that there was a disagreement between Apple and Facebook about a feature Facebook wanted to have where you could promote your post and you could pay money to expose it to more people. And Apple felt that, that seems like in-app purchase. We should get a cut of that. And then it says, well, no, Facebook thought it was an ad in some sort. And then the article never really justified why Facebook thought it was an ad. But that's what led to that, crappy clickbait title. I think, again, maybe they've just done some sloppy reporting, or they just fall into the abyss of what Apple does or doesn't say, because they said, it appears that, Facebook won, or Meta, now that they've changed their name, that Meta won. And they, in the article, they say, this is also like a similar disagreement they had with, Matt Mullenweg and either Tumblr or some sort of similar feature where you can pay money to expose it to lots of other people. I suspect, although I can't prove this, I suspect that with the case of Zuckerberg and Facebook, that if it was promoted and they did it from a Mac or a PC or some other non-iOS, non-iPhone device, they probably were allowed to do it. Whereas if they actually did it, and promoted it on the iPad or iPhone, I suspect that they probably do have to pay some sort of, commerce transaction fee to Apple, and that's the motivation for this stop ahead and pay toll background for this week. Because this, and there's another article if we get a chance to get into it. It seems that Apple's dedicated to locking down that any commerce that happens through apps on the iPhone, they view as their opportunity to get a 15 or 30% slice of the revenue. So I think that's what this beautiful, horrible sounding conspiratorial Apple is bad. They conspired with Facebook to try to get Facebook revenue. It just all vanishes once you read past the first paragraph.
The takeaway I got out of that was that putting that part in was filler, and the piece was about still designed to inflame people or enrage people. But the part that people are going to be enraged about is Apple adding ad space into more of their apps and services. So right now, when you do a search for a business type in the Maps app, you don't see paid position there like you can with Google Maps. So that would be a new thing. And when you search for podcasts, having someone that's paying to promote their podcast have their search results show up first, and then all the others after that, which of course is going to absolutely enrage people. But this is inevitable, and it's just part of how the money and advertising system works. And so there you go.
Jeff, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm throwing an article from Engadget in about that angle of this. So both chat rooms have it. And this is a place that I wanted to go because this was another thing that, there's some clickbait, aspects to it. But, everybody's saying, oh, Apple says no ads. Apple's anti-ads. And then, Apple's going to triple its ad revenue. Well, I don't think Apple's anti-ads. Apple is anti-tracking. And so, I see this as akin to, buying a billboard on the highway. That you see it if you drive by. If you don't drive by, you don't see it. But it's not going to and so if I have, I'm stretching here, but if I have a billboard on a street or highway with a lot of restaurants, it would only make sense that I'm going to advertise restaurants there. I may not advertise, oil for my car. Yeah. So I look at this and say, okay, this is targeted advertising of a different kind. This is targeting based on the subject that you would be interacting with alongside of it. Yeah. So, I don't see this as evil. I see it as, it's another revenue source, and kind of why wouldn't you? Because if it's done right, it's not going to detract that much from the experience. It'll detract some, but, it might be worth the revenue.
One day we're going to have to go down a rabbit hole of why targeted advertising is evil. And today is not going to be the day, but,
next week. It's a date, Warren. Next week.
Yeah, you want you want Brittany here for that discussion.
Sure. But, and, you have a bunch of advertisers and companies on this podcast, and life will be different for us. Companies, small and big, need to advertise, and there's a few type of advertisings, right? There's word of mouth, and there's ads. And companies who do word of mouth advertising or word of mouth and are popular become popular because people talk about them, and they go in that, and they actually, they're actually. So I'll get that later. Anyways, I'm not going to go down it, but targeting advertisement is the goal of advertisers and companies, and they want to do it because it's the easiest way to sell their product. And again, is watching a sports game and having beer commercials come on, is that targeted advertisement? Yeah. Is it, invasive, like they stole your data? Not quite, but they know who their demographics are, and they, there's Nielsen ratings and things like that, so they kind of know some things. So, we just need to figure out what are we worried about. As far as the story goes, Apple, Apple needs to make money, and and their shareholders will like that. So advertisements make money.
Warren, I don't want to go. I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but I will go this far. I think that I think the targeted advertising thing just got out of hand. Go check the dog by all means. I feel like I feel like the targeted advertising got out of hand, and that's why it's perceived as so evil, because they seem to be tracking every single thing you do. And when you start seeing Facebook claim that Apple's ad tracking or anti-ad tracking cost them billions, and that's with a B, then somebody's making a pile of money off of something. And so I watch the Golf Channel. Okay, what do I see? I see ads for golf equipment and golf courses. Surprise! I'm sure if I watched the Hunting and Fishing Channel, guess what I would see? I'd see ads for hunting and fishing gear.
Guns and ammo.
Yeah. Sorry, Mark.
You see ads for guns and ammo and clothing. Surprise!
Yeah, exactly.
I'm shocked there's gambling going on in that casino.
Yeah, and so that to me is, maybe because that's where it all started. I find that to be an acceptable form of advertising, and an acceptable form of targeted advertising. But if I log on to I'm just going to make it up as I go, CNN, and I start seeing ads for something that I surfed Amazon for, then something's not right. If I see something that I was looking at on Facebook. Yeah, well, you're right. You do, David. And that's where I think the evil part of targeted advertising comes in, that people have come to realize that they are being used.
Facebook does it too. You just go to any place and you get an ad that's you've gone somewhere to look at a particular topic, and then 5 minutes later, I'm either getting an email or I go to another website and that ad is being shown to me on that particular topic I looked at.
So, Mike,
as an example, I just went to CNN and hit the little shield there in Safari. 74 trackers.
Yep,
at CNN.com.
No, CNN's the worst.
74.
So it's creepy, but again, would you rather see ads that you would be interested in or not? If you had to see ads, it's creepy. I know it's creepy.
But this is not about. Webb points out on the Golf Channel, you still see beer commercials too. Beer is universal. Good point.
Beer is wonderfully universal. It brings us all together.
It does. Yes.
And speaking of beer, I need to go and do a barbecue. So it was wonderful, Warren. I hope Chuck can schedule talking about Apple advertising or advertising in general as a first topic for one of these shows, because I think that one would be a lot of fun. And
hey, Mark, before you cut out, tell everyone where they can find you when you're not barbecuing.
Oh, Twitter at MarkFuccio, all lowercase, one word.
Great. Thanks so much for being here. Really, really appreciate it.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens between Elon and the board of Twitter. So we have plenty of stuff coming up into the fall.
Yeah. Agreed.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
See you guys. Hey, Chuck, I'm out too. I gotta clean this mess up. All
right.
Somebody just wants to eat it all.
Hey, thanks, Warren. Take care.
No problem. All right, guys. You too. You're gonna kill me.
Yeah.
I can't believe Mark ditched us for a barbecue. Where are his priorities?
Okay, now that both of them are gone, we can start the real show. Finally.
Yeah. But just to follow up, and somebody tell me if they disagree, please. But I guess I don't mind. And Warren brings up an interesting point. What would you rather see? I don't think I object to that part of it. What I object to is the fact that I know that they're doing other things with my data, because now we've been educated to that. Right. That now I am a commodity that's being sold. That's the part that bugs me. Somebody back me up. Say something.
That technology can be used for other things besides advertising. And, you look at now, like, people getting prosecuted for having an abortion because of something Facebook, turned over to prosecutors.
Or the story that was it Target that started emailing pregnant women before they knew they were pregnant, or something, something like that. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, it's like I said, give the example. I've signed into an account, whatever vendor it was, and then 10 minutes later, oh, you left your cart full. You sure you want to go back and make a purchase? Because if I decided to abandon it, and it's creepy.
David, does that bother you?
A little bit.
Because if I have an account, if I don't have an account, then it's creepy. But if I have an account there and I put something in the cart and then the phone rings or the doorbell rings or something and I get up and forget to order it that I really intended to, I don't mind that part.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, Chuck.
Yeah,
if I have an account.
Okay.
Yeah, if you have an account.
There's been times I haven't, and it's happened.
Yeah, well, that's
when it's creepy. Yeah, Chuck, I'm totally backing you up on the creepy part about advertising. The problem that I have isn't having ads that are tailored or targeted to me because they fit my interests. The problem is that that the companies that are aggregating this data are doing the Jurassic Park thing, where what was it? Dr. Malcolm's line about they didn't stop to think about just because they can't, or
they didn't stop to think if they should.
Yes, thank you. And so they have taken this to an extreme where they are trying to collect and successfully collecting so much data about us and everything that we do, that they have built these incredibly detailed profiles about everyone. You don't even need to have a Facebook account for Facebook to have an incredibly detailed profile on you. And then to monetize that, just the whole idea that these companies are collecting so much information about us, selling it to other companies, and it's being used by organizations that don't seem to have morals, standards, or scruples, and I feel like we're being exploited in a horrible way. And then Jim, you brought up the legal prosecution or criminal prosecutions for the girl that ended up getting arrested and her mom getting arrested for an abortion, and that shouldn't have never have happened. And yet here's these companies that are collecting so much information on us, and it feels as if there's no real control over what they're collecting, how they're collecting it, and how they're using it.
And I mean, Jim brought up the tracking for, let's just say, political reasons. I'm hesitant to bring up even a specific political issue just because political issues.
Yeah.
But just the idea that that, I mean, and look, it can go both ways. If it helps solve a murder or if it helps prevent a murder, then that's great. But how many times can you actually confirm that happens? But
that's not necessarily a justification. I mean, we can suspend the Bill of the Rights and probably solve lots more murders. But that's we passed the Bill of Rights for a reason.
Yes, Jim, I am backing you up 100% on that. Chuck, the idea that this information could be used for good in the sense that maybe we could solve a crime, that sounds nice, but I have a real problem with that, because that becomes justification for eroding our rights, and the idea that we're doing good is a valid reason for stripping away privacy, freedom of speech, And if you project this out in various political climates around the world, freedom of religion, that is a path that I am not comfortable going down.
No, Jeff, I agree. And, and for quite a while, and for better or worse, my opinions were documented on this show, that, it's like, why we're all worried too much about this stuff, and at the time, I don't think any of us knew what was actually happening. And I'm not sure even who to give credit for to point it out, or did the idiots just overdo it so much that we had to notice? If they had kept it undercover a little bit, they could have continued to cash in, and probably very few of us would have paid attention. Now it's just so blatant and grossly overused that you can't help but notice it.
It's like they don't care anymore that
Yeah. Well, it's worse, Guy. It's like we're entitled to it. I mean, that was the message I took away from all the Facebook kerfuffle over the last year. Well, my God, Apple's interfering with our business model. It's our business model to take your information and try to sell you sneakers. That's our right. What? The Mac Voices Live panel finishes up our conversation about reports that Apple will be accepting more advertising in some of its products, and why that may not be quite as dire as it sounds. That's next time on Mac Voices. We'll see you then. I'm Chuck Joyner, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with Mac Voices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.